So before we start, I just want to thank all of you for taking your precious time to join us, be it online, offline. We're here with a very esteemed panel. These are all experts, and I'm the amateur before them. So before we start proper, we are going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So maybe we start from the leftmost. This handsome man.
Sure. Big good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here, and big thank you to Carrier Community for organizing the session today and Joshua for moderating. I'm Xiang from CBRE Data Center, so I lead investment advisory there. At CBRE, we combine local real estate experience with our data center product expertise to advise our clients on a buy, build, manage, and sell process. So thank you.
Thank you. And the next handsome boy with us.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris Street, and with JLL, lead the data center practice across Asia Pacific, and that includes not only transaction and investment advisory, but our build and design, manage, sustainability services, and our leasing programs.
And our next handsome.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. My name is Srini Rao. I'm the regional director of the Singapore region at BDX Data Centers. I manage all the business, including the P&L, for our operations in this region. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I am your friendly neighborhood moderator, Joshua. Today, we're going to talk about the topic that's very close to our hearts. It's not a technical conversation. I think it's more an aspirational one. And what that means is that all of us, if you're in this event, if you're joining us online, we all know that data centers power the way we live, the way we work, the way we play. And increasingly, it also changes the way we think about the internet. And because of that, we also concede that while data centers are transforming our lives digitally, it also means that there is an impact to the environment. It is what it is. We know that. If you drive a car, you know there's an impact. If you go to a restaurant and you do takeout, there's an impact to the environment as well. So we want to go on with our lives, but we also want to be responsible to the planet because it's the only planet we have. It's the right thing to do. And increasingly, from an ESG perspective, it's the profitable thing to do. It's also the thing that our stakeholders, our shareholders want as well. So be it for the right reasons, the wrong reasons. That's why we want to talk a little bit about the ESG perspective. And I had a very good conversation with our two good friends at the second row. Yeah, we had a very long talk yesterday, and we spoke about what ESG is. And that's a very big challenge. Before we can have an intelligent conversation on the topic, we need to first agree on the first principles, the definitions. For the friends who talk about GHG, GRESB, ISO 14000, we talk about taxonomy. What's the taxonomy for sustainability? We won't go down that road. If not, it would take us 4 hours. Not going down that road, I'm sorry. But I wanted to just briefly hear from Srini, because you've been thinking about this topic for the longest time. Each time we meet, we always talk about sustainability. So for the benefit of those of us who have not been thinking about it recently, do you have a definition of what sustainability is? And then with that in mind, as that preamble, we can kind of understand when we say a data center is sustainable. What is a sustainable data center? So to you, Dr. Rao.
I think sustainability is a very abused word for lack of anything else. Everyone talks sustainability in a very loose manner. But from our data center operations, sustainability is a lot more than just power. Okay, it's how we conduct our overall operations. Okay, be it how efficient you manage power, how efficiently you're doing your cooling systems, what of IT hardware refreshes you're doing, the type of clean energy you're able to get into the data centers. Okay, and also decarbonization. And these days you find that these discussions are happening with our customers as well. Okay, everyone talks about sustainability. And then if you look at the ecosystem at large, there are efforts in the entire ecosystem is stepping in. Vendors are now talking about sustainability, be it in terms of construction, okay, the types of cement, the types of painting you use, okay. And so I think overall, there's a lot more awareness in sustainability, and people realize that the fact that almost every forum, there is an element of a topic or a panel to talk about sustainability. Yeah, so that is, and
Right, thank you for that. I think once we have a better appreciation what sustainability is, hi Daquan, that also helps us to make sure that are we on the right track? Are we headed in the right direction? And of course, we always want to show both the good and the bad, the pain and the opportunities. And so my next question is to all of us, except myself. What do you think are some of the major challenges for the operators? Now, maybe I just want to slightly add why we have Ziyang and Chris, because when I talk to Srini is an expert, he's a veteran, he has seen this for many years. But when we talk to the likes of CBRE or JLL, they are supporting hundreds of operators. So what I think we are getting is a very privileged overview. It's not just one particular operator, but what's happening even in different parts of the world. So I thought maybe we start with Srini and then we go along. Apologies. So Srini, if you could just briefly share what have been your challenges in that sustainability journey.
I think largely it's, if you look at, I speak specifically about Singapore, okay? One of the biggest challenges we have in Singapore for sustainability is power, okay? Power because we rely on a single grid and the very little element of green in that grid, okay? And in terms of me looking at alternate sources of energy, is also fairly limited, okay? Most of us are constrained by real estate when it comes to deploying solar at our data centers, okay? And also we have the disadvantage of the misconception of what data centers are, because we are considered the bad boys of from a point of power utilization. And at the same time, which I think is wrong, because I think they should look at us as part of enabling the digital infrastructure, and that's a whole new discussion there. Also, a lot of the regulations that the government has are not in, they're still skewed. They still look at data centers yet another commercial building rather than, part of a digital platform. We talk digital, we talk digital infrastructure, we talk about budgets for that, but data center are still considered as not part of it. So that's our biggest challenge that I think we have in Singapore.
All right, I hear you. Let's hear from Chris next.
Sure, I think one of the things that just said if you take a couple steps back is that the industry itself has grown up out of, and in many countries around the world, and over the last probably two and a half decades, right, that I've been in it, is that it grew out of the telcos, right? So a lot of the carriers here who work in a very regulated environment traditionally in most markets, right? And it came out of that. And then the industry for the last probably 15 years has had very limited light touch because it moved out of that telco space. And so governments haven't really had a chance or didn't know what to do with it at a very macro level. And now what we are seeing is that governments around the world, whether it's in North America, whether it's in Europe and here throughout Asia, we're seeing the governments really focus on digital infrastructure because they see the importance of it to the overall economy. And they also see the intensiveness in terms of the resource use of whether it's the electricity utilization, whether it's the water usage in some of the markets. And so that kind of oversight and in some instances heavy-handed approach of regulation is coming in. And that's a big change for a lot of the operators because for the most part they've built these companies with a very light touch of regulation. Now they're having to react. And so that translates into operational aspects of not only how you run the facilities themselves, but from a business perspective, what you're disclosing, some of the reporting that's coming up. in Europe, right, which is going to kind of push across the entire world, some of the new disclosure laws that are going to come into effect in 2024 are going to seriously impact the business in terms of what you have to disclose, how you have to disclose it, and those sustainability kind of they're not financial disclosures, they're non-financial disclosures, but those will come into play in terms of how you operationalize the business and how you're communicating to stakeholder groups across the world.
Right. I wanted to say handsome. I'm sorry. It's because all of them have been working out clearly. So I'm sorry. I'm just having fun. So sorry.
Thanks
to you.
Joshua. So to Chris' point, I think it's worth kind of, taking like a 10,000 feet view and figuring out, how much is the resource usage of the whole data center, industry today. So, based on IEA study in 2021, up to 1.4% of global electricity production is actually consumed by the data center sector. And greenhouse gas emissions is around the 2.5% range. So I think this could be surprising to some members of the audience. This is actually higher than the civil aviation industry. So, the reason why it's important for basically all operators, regulators to have a comprehensive approach is the industry has grown a lot in the past 20 years. So the carbon footprint is it's no longer what it was 20 years ago, when it was just a couple of telco switch rooms and computer server rooms. I think that's really the first point, because the footprint of the industry has increased so big. So I think what is useful to kind of frame the question is, from a regulatory standpoint, what is a good kind of North Star that like a country or a city can aim for. And I think a good example is Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, they have a energy efficiency office under this government authority that's called the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department. That coupled together with building department will be the equivalent of the URA in Singapore. So both these kind of government bodies, they produce sustainable building guidance, energy efficiency guidance, and they're pretty detailed. They even have like discussions on guidance on like cooling tower provisions. So it's very detailed. And the government CIO office actually produced like a guidance pamphlet to basically say, in the Hong Kong context, taking into account business nuances, the climate conditions, what would and international best practice, what would the ideal data center look like? So when we have this cooperation among all these quasi-government bodies to kind of set the North Star of what a good data center facility and operator should operate like, I think it's very useful to kind of frame the behaviors of the industry.
You mentioned Hong Kong, and I just recalled just a few months ago, it was a Hong Kong OGCIO. They did a kind of hush briefing about underground data centers. Then they brought them on a tour. There were photos circulating. We don't know where that leads us, but it's a very interesting aspiration. And today we talk a lot about aspiration, but ultimately aspiration has to lead to action. That's what ESG is about. That's what sustainability is about. You can have great plans, but the plans are only good as the execution. That's why through this conversation, it's about encouraging all of you, online, offline, to be inspired, to get some good ideas, to get some good guidance, and then to exercise, to bring this back to your built environment, to your data centers, and you can bring this into action. And then action leads to results. All of this adds together into, shall we say, good outcomes. Now, from a lot of our past offline conversations, we spoke about the 3 Ps of sustainability. So that's to you. We spoke about this yesterday as well. People, profit, planet. That's what sustainability is always centered around. It has to be about the people. It has to be about the profit because it must make business sense. It has to be about the planet because without a planet, there is no people, there is no profit. And it's also about priorities, it's about trade-offs. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask each of our esteemed panelists, what do you think are the key design and operational considerations that operators like yourself take into account when you build, when you operate? And maybe I will start with, just for my benefit, we'll start this way again. So Dr. Rao, please.
Yeah, firstly, BDX is owned by I Squared Capital. It's a private equity fund. And I Squared believes in sustainability. So it's part of our DNA. Today, they have investments in renewable projects which generate more than 5 gigawatt of power annually across the world. So that's the mandate, and that's the direction that's been set to us. So every element of our, be it our design, our construction, we follow sustainability. Even in a data center, which is like 10 years old in Singapore, which we acquired from Telstra, we've tweaked the PUE almost down by about 35% since we've taken over the last 3 years. And how do we do it? We looked at every element of the system, be it chillers, crack units, and so on. We used the local universities, and we got some AI modeling done, as for we able to optimally come to an optimal temperature for our chillers. Okay, we offer IT hardware refresh for our customers, and we see some of the customers actually taking it up. Okay, so make it a lot more efficient. Okay, we are working on tweaking all our systems to ensure that we have a Green Mark Platinum certification. So which means we are following all the guidelines as set by the code here. Okay, and and we are also looking at how we could bring in solar in a limited manner, and how we can work with various vendors to become a little more efficient in different. We constantly looking at how we can raise the temperatures on our data halls, and we're doing a lot of CFC studies with engineering companies. We're also looking at how to look at our air flows in our data halls, and sometimes we are regrooming assets for the customer's permission, so that we can optimize the cooling and the temperatures in the data halls.
When you mentioned renewables, I got very excited. I wonder why. But I shall not make use of that unfair advantage. Chris, if you could share your thoughts on the same.
Sure. I think, as Srini alluded to, it goes to the entire life cycle of the data center, right? So everything from where you select the site into your process and its access to things like renewable or renewable energy, but also other resources, right? In terms of potable water, access to personnel. In a lot of markets, we're getting kind of constrained on the technical skill sets, and being able to get people to the site is becoming a concern as we go farther and farther afield out of the capital cities, et cetera. So anyways, but it starts from the entire life cycle. But in terms of some of the operational and design aspects, I think the biggest impact that I've seen over my career, especially in the last 10 years, it's a revolution within data center operations in terms of the software that supports the facility, right? When I started, it was typically 2 old dudes sitting in this back closet and looking at a green screen and clipboards, right? And you do your clipboard walk around at the site, and that isn't today's world. I mean, there's some of those data centers that still sit there on the enterprise side, but for now, most of it, you walk into any co-location center around the world in any market, software and sensors throughout, basically measuring every aspect down to the valve level on the water side, meters on the electrical distribution, and being able to view that and then do cross correlation and the intelligence now, the AI that's starting to impact the business in terms of looking at it in a preventative way. It's revolutionizing what we're doing, and it goes back to the old adage: is if you can't measure it, you can't really you can't improve upon it, right? Because you don't have the data. And so we're starting to get that data. I think we're starting to put it in a much more useful way. you know, and that's the biggest revolution that I've seen, just personally, just that, and it's a complete shift. And I think that software aspect and that ability and that what I always harp on, it's the transparency into the operating environment. Because if you look at it from a business perspective, then the other side, it's not only the operator that has the view into the facility, but then opening that up to the customer so that they can see their actual, and that really helps them make decisions about, you know, whether to raise the set point on the operating environment, whether they can do a tech refresh and do that kind of technology roadmap planning that's so important. So I'll leave it at that. But.
All right.
So Chris and Srini gave a whole comprehensive roadmap, especially on the operational level and on how do data centers basically operate in a sustainable way. I'll just add on. I think firstly it starts at the site selection level. So to the extent where the climate is cool and colder, and you still don't have those latency issues, then of course operators would prefer to basically site their data centers there. So we see this very clearly in the Nordics. So a lot of the Nordic data centers actually support a lot of the loads in from Germany and UK. So that's something interesting to note. And I think just this morning, there's an interesting news that just came out where actually the Japanese government is kind of encouraging data center operators to shift to Kyushu and Hokkaido. So I think a lot of the thinking around this is one, land and water, potable water availability is much higher, outside the key kind of Osaka and Tokyo areas where it's kind of more power and water scarce. I think that's one issue. And the second is, because land is more abundant in Kyushu and Hokkaido, it's much easier to have wind and solar deployments, and much easier to explore, basically on-site kind of renewable power generation kind of avenues to try to achieve 100% renewable energy.
In fact, I will allude to one of the reports written by one of your competitors. I won't mention who it is. Some years ago, when it spoke about the mature markets, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Tokyo, and Shanghai. And then this particular person alluded to the point that for Hong Kong and Singapore, they're kind of screwed because the opportunity cost for land is just so high, which means that the opportunity cost for renewables is also very high. So these are constraints because there's no hinterland to grow into. And that leads into issues on site selection. It leads into issues of how do we maximize the use of renewables, for example.
Yeah.
In some parts of the world, wind power is feasible. In some parts of the world, geothermal is feasible. I think in our part of the world, maybe New Zealand, Philippines, and Indonesia, if I recall correctly. And even so, not the entire country. Only certain parts of the country, you are able to tap on some of these geographical advantages. And I think when you look at different geographies, different countries, different markets, you realize that every market is unique, every market has its own constraints, and one of these constraints would also be the regulatory. Like in Singapore, we are now talking about the Green Mark 2021, we are talking about some very interesting other issues. But I think even though we can't spend 4 hours and deep dive, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry to Rao, I'm sorry to Lei Kwan. If I do that, then you and Namisha will have to cancel your panel. So I'm sorry, for your sake, I will have to cut this short. But I just want to give a glimpse to the audience of online and offline. What are some of the regulatory considerations? And so we're not gonna deep dive. We just want to get a glimpse of it. So back to Xiang, if you could share what you think are some of these regulatory concerns for Indonesia, because some of us clearly are interested in Indonesia.
So in terms of Indonesia, I think what's very promising is, so for some context, PLN is kind of like the state monopoly on electricity transmission and retailing. So they are the sole buyer of electricity in Indonesia. So quite a few data center operators that kind of announced deployments in mostly around the Greater Jakarta area. What they have done in I would say the past 6 months to a year is actually purchasing renewable energy credits from PLN. And the good thing is basically on all levels of government, the Indonesia government is very keen on pushing renewables as a big part of their power mix. In fact, right today, President Joko Widodo is actually at MBS giving the keynote speech on the green transition, climate change, and basically what is the pathway to get to a sustainable future. So they have a stretch goal to achieve, I think, a 23% renewable mix in their kind of their power mix by 2025, and they're investing a lot of capital, and there's a lot of I would say senior leadership attention on this issue in Indonesia.
I'm sorry. At my age, I don't do very well with they call it multitasking. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just I'm running Pentium 2, so apologies. So next to Chris, I think the same question, but in the context of the Philippines, please.
Okay, sure. So Philippines is an exciting market, right? And it's a pretty new market relative to data centers. Historically, it's been a market that's been dominated by the two large telcos, right? Globe and EP-LDT in terms of historical coverage. There's a bit of carrier neutral that's grown up over the past probably 5 to 10 years. And with that, the data center sector is one of those markets where it's a pretty light touch. I think the biggest concern that you're starting to see there is because the inrush of new platforms coming into the Philippines and predominantly a greenfield build is land use regulations. They are trying to, they've got a green building code that they're trying to push into the data center sector. But most of the development, right? I think there's, from our view, there's probably a credible pipeline of approximately 125 to 150 megawatts of credible projects coming on. That's a little higher probability than PowerPoint projects, which there are a few of those in Manila too, I would say, but it will go nameless. The biggest in the majority across the entire Philippines, right? This development's all focused in Manila, greater Manila area, north, south, some in the metro. Manila's biggest push on resources is it's got a serious issue with is water. And so from it's very water constrained. It's got all the risk factors that you would ever want and then some, in terms of a market, in terms of building, but the regulatory oversight around resource. Meralco is the utility provider there in the Philippines, and they do a relatively good job, I'll bet a bit expensive in terms of electricity usage at industrial scale. But the serious kind of consideration right now is water usage and how they're going to get water to most of the data center projects that are using water to actually cool. And I think that's where we're going to see probably the focus over the next kind of 12 to 18 months, really kind of because it's competing with other large scale kind of industrial uses in terms of water. And then in the macro sense, Philippines has a challenge, and the greater Manila metro market has a challenge of getting potable water to the citizens, which is obviously much higher priority than getting that non-potable water to data centers. So there's going to be that kind of trade-off and decisions and some sort of regulatory intervention. I think that'll happen in the next year or so.
I will paraphrase. The devil's in the details, because it's that in itself is a 4-hour conversation. Whether you go to Pasig City, you go to Mandaluyong, you go somewhere else. It's very interesting, and I think it's just unfortunate, and I blame Lei Guan and Nimisha and Adeline for this, because I can't drag this on. If not, I have to cancel your panel. But I would like to hear from Srini, and I will add another point, because Roy has asked a question, and for reasons unknown to me. Oh, no, we're not at the question. No, Lei Guan, not yet. I know you're enthusiastic. I'm sorry. We're all old friends here. We're all old friends. That's why this is not even, to me, a panel discussion. This is just good friends sitting down, having a good conversation. But at the same time, because we are enthusiastic about the topic, every time we talk about it, we want to enthuse more people to think about it, and then bring this back, have the same conversation with your colleagues, with your stakeholders, shareholders, because that's how we're going to make action. So in a sense, while we all wear different hats, we are all advocates for sustainability. But I'm sorry, I'm taking up Srini's time. Srini, if you could briefly share your thoughts on the same, but specifically for Singapore.
Yeah, I think 2-3 years ago, Singapore thought that they had a magic formula for how to regulate the data center industry. Fast forward, suddenly we have these new applications, AI, and suddenly there seems to be a certain amount of, lack of any other word, a nervous energy. Suddenly there's an intent to review and reconsider data centers. Okay, and also in the last 3 years, what Singapore government has done is has gone and explored alternate forms of power, be it solar, from Laos and Cambodia and Indonesia, and also Malaysia now. And they're also now looking at reviving the sunship cable, solar cable, all the way from Australia. So these are all initiatives that they're trying to drive and influence. And they realize that we had a great run, and we established Singapore as the leading data center hub. And suddenly everything came to a standstill. And we enabled spillover, I would say initially, into Johor or Batam or Jakarta, and then also into Thailand and Manila and the rest of the region. It's great that it's growing everywhere, but I think now they're trying to claw back and see how we can reposition Singapore as for new applications. But the problem is these new applications are power hungry. I just spoke to somebody from one of the startup AI companies, and they're talking about 30, 40 kilowatt per rack, right? And they need a minimum of 10 of those racks to get started. So it's a paradigm shift in how you look at this, and it's interesting how Singapore is going to face that, and if they want to be relevant in the AI game, so it'll be interesting. And I think there will be some changes in the coming few months. I think IMD is inviting people to their labs to see how startups can, get new ideas and get innovative. So I think there will be some trade-off, and you'll see Singapore 2024 totally different, in my opinion. Chris?
Okay, I'm in the interest of time. I'm going to briefly read Roy Samuel's question. By the way, Roy, I know where's your office. As it turns out, well, the three gentlemen, the offices are quite near PLQ. I wonder why, but since that's the case, the next time Roy will have a panel discussion at your office, and then we'll have this same conversation. But I'm just going to read out his question. It's a very good one. Our industry is very secretive, and sharing of information and lessons is very limited. I disagree. DC owners do not want to share and publish meaningful information that can assist the broader community. I respectfully disagree. How can we get them to share aside from mandatory reporting regulations as part of ESG? Now, this is unscripted, all right? This is unscripted. So I'm going to pose this question to Srini, and then as well as to Chris as well, but to Srini first, because I just want to add to that point. How can we as operators engage with stakeholders and customers to build a more sustainable future for the industry, and Oh dear, I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost here. Is the Pentium 2 working again? And what strategies have been proven most effective in this regard? So I will paraphrase what I'm really trying to ask. How can we be more effective in sharing information with each other to the point that we can share so that we can effectively push for improvement actions? So Srini first, and then we'll hear from Chris.
Yeah, at BDX, we're trying to be a lot more inclusive with all our stakeholders, be it government agencies or our customers. Okay. Firstly, we've developed our own in-house platform called the 360 View. It gives customers the ability to see their own power consumption, as well as the heat in the data halls, as well as the carbon emissions of the data center. Okay, we're engaging a project with the University of Singapore, okay, where it's a 2-year research collaboration, where we are looking at this of bringing that 360 View platform to them and giving them the IP, access to the IP for that platform, and to see how we can offer this to not just data centers, but to share how we are managing power and cooling and elements of sustainability to larger population in Singapore. So I think we're very open, contrary to what Royce has said. And I think my opinion, data center industry probably has the skill set to help in this march towards sustainability. And I think we can contribute a lot. And we've always been very open. Almost every forum we share what we're doing to tweak our data centers. And I think we've published enough data, and we're happy to continue the dialogue and participate with various agencies. Yeah.
All right, Chris, if you could share our thoughts.
Sure. So I think that from Roy's perspective, I think that there's some truth to it. And there's historically that's definitely been the case. I think the industry is opening up a bit, but still there is a lack of disclosure down to the details of operating at the site. And most of the operators, if you look at the sustainability reports of most co-location firms, and I'll expand that into even most telcos. And I've done a bit of work here in my doctorate program on this. So it's not a just anecdotal kind of analysis, but there's it's a lot more marketing than it is operations in terms of the level of detail and the specifics. Now, some of that is because there are trade secrets, right? And there are commercial interests that are behind it that you can't just be fully transparent around that, because it's the business itself is inherently, in terms of data center operations, it does matter in terms of some of the inputs in terms of the electricity and the resources coming in. That's a bit different than, say, a large use application like, say, a semiconductor factory, right? They're making chips. We're turning electricity into bits fundamentally, right? And delivering digital services. And so that input is quite a bit different, and the disclosure of those, there's a lot more sensitivity to that. But I do think, from an industry perspective, is that we can do much better to be transparent, and there it's really engaging with stakeholders. It's coming anyways. Like just look to Europe. And it is coming in January 1st. You will see ratcheted up, and it's not just if you're in Europe, it's actually if you're serving European customers. So we will be affected in Asia from this, and it is 2 steps beyond what we're doing today in terms of disclosure. SGX has disclosure obligations for publicly listed companies here in Singapore around sustainability. And so you'll see that, but they're pretty loosey-goosey, to be honest. And you can say, I don't comply because of I didn't like it on Tuesday, and so it's a pretty loose kind of thing. But that's okay. I mean, it is a step in the right direction. I think if you do look at the industry, more than 85% of the operators out there, both private and all the public ones that I've found, and like more than 85% of the private ones actually publish a sustainability report within the first 3 years of their first round of funding. So it's a very positive thing that they're starting to take steps, but I do think that there's significantly more they can do. And how you do that is executing with your stakeholders. So I think a lot of times there's some I'll say models out there, engagement models where people have partnered with NGOs to in a positive manner to actually look at their impact on the local communities in which they operate. And then obviously you've got the regulators across each of the countries and markets in which you operate to work with in terms of their specific disclosures and like electricity and water, et cetera. So.
Right. I think it's notable. There are two notable efforts, like for example, the climate neutral data center pact, which is in a certain geography, and there's also the iMason's climate accord. So these two are, I think, two notable efforts where different ones cut across, and they say let's think about how we can do better. Now, the intent is not to deep dive because we just don't have the time for it. But I'm going to pose one last question to Ziyang, and this question is for your benefit. You know who I'm talking about. So I had a very good conversation yesterday with two good friends who are seated in front. Hi, yes, yeah, both of you, and we spoke about how does someone get started in the scene. It's easy if you have done your ATS. It's easy if you started as a ISO 14000, which to me is the gold standard, understanding the differences between embodied carbon, operational carbon. Yeah. It's a lot about taxonomy. I know that's another rabbit hole, but the question I wanted to pose is, how would someone, if you're in this space, get started on their sustainability journey? And once they start, what can they do to make sure that they get that momentum? So this last question is for you, and after that, we will then pass the mic to Lei Guan. I know you have a question to ask. I know so I know. But let's hear from Ziyang.
Okay. Thanks, Joshua. So based on CBRE's conversation with a lot of our clients, actually, a lot of operators have already started this sustainability journey, and this is really the key driver of this is because the key customers are the cloud providers, and the cloud providers have all, I think, in the next 10 or 20 years committed to go carbon neutral. So, I think as operators, where supply meets demand, if they want to get, the big deployments in their facilities, they have to match the kind of like the carbon and climate goals which the major cloud providers have signed up for. I think that's point one. So I think kind of like the second point is, what Joshua alluded to earlier is, I think, like initiatives like the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact is very useful. So, I mean, more than 100 operators and trade associations, I would say global data center providers and a lot of European trade associations, they kind of came together and say, hey, let's agree on a certain sustainability framework. So in terms of water use, energy efficiency, power usage, PUE. And I think what is useful in this kind of pact is there's actually some bite to it. So I think a lot of there's quite a lot of greenwashing in the sector. But what is good for this particular pact is that there's bite to it. There are external auditors that will actually check that these metrics that you promise that you will fulfill are actually fulfilled in a certain time frame. So to Chris' point, what gets measured gets done. So I would say, for operator that, most have started this journey, but to add momentum on this journey, make sure that you are part of this conversation, part of this kind of sustainability discussions with the rest of the industry to make sure, you are kind of on the sustainability and innovation forefront. That's what I'll say.
All right. I wanted to say something intelligent, but my only reasonable response is wow. I'm sorry, really wow. And before I pass the mic to Lei Guan, I'll come to you. I will. I think what we hear from the panelists is all of this does not happen by accident. A sustainability plan does not happen by accident. good intentions does not lead to a good plan, but having good plan does not lead to execution. You have to be intentional, you have to be strategic, you have to be collaborative, you have to reach across and talk to different ones to be effective in your sustainability journey. So there is individual responsibility and there's corporate responsibility. Of course, ESG focuses more on the corporate. Now I'm gonna walk over to Lei Guan. I don't think I don't think if the camera will follow me, but Lei Guan, you will have your question. After which we'll take one more question, and then we will land the plane. Oh, no, or you can come over. You can have my seat. I'll give you my.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me? Okay. So sorry I was late. I just want to ask whether we have done some comparisons of the data center world versus other worlds. So we always accuse data center of high power usage. But if you look at how many people a data center serve versus, say, some shopping centers, do we then do this kind of comparisons to say that maybe, this row of shopping centers, the entire row of shopping center only serve, say, couple of thousand people, but one data center serve millions of people. So maybe Singapore should think about doing this comparison and close down some shopping centers, save some energy. I just wonder whether, and then if you're looking at the trend is online shopping. And most people go to shopping center to chill out and not to buy because they were already purchased. And then they just go check it out, chill out. My son said to me, I'm going shopping center. I said, you buying more things? No, it's cool there. So the shopping center is for cooling people, no longer for shopping. So I don't know, for Singapore so small, and then should we not think about this and compare to, and people are working from home these days. So do we need so many officers? So I don't know, cross industry, do we do this kind of comparisons? Thank you.
Okay, before I randomly ask someone to answer, my point to you would be that, for example, hospitals save lives. They consume power. Do we shut down hospitals? I've never heard anyone say, let's shut down the hospitals to save power. That has never happened, will never happen. Even the airports. Airports are probably one of the most carbon-intensive industries, but so far I've not heard of anyone say, let's shut down the airports. So to even allude to the possibility that we shut down data centers to save power, to me is ludicrous, but I concede. At some point, we have to prioritize. We have to be very calculated in how we tweak the way forward, but it's tough. The devil's in the details. We do want to land the plane in less than 5 minutes time. So would anyone like to give a very brief, not a 20-minute exposition, but a very brief, okay, Dr. Rao, please.
Yeah, I think, the CFA, it highlighted some of the issues, okay? And one of the things was what value does the data center bring to the economy, okay? It's a fairly convoluted response to it, but then you talk about all your hyperscalers, customers, and what they offer to the customers. One of the biggest things is, the other thing they're also confused is they ask, how much of employment can you bring, right? Data centers, we take pride that the lesser the people, the more efficient we are. So there's a contradictory of how we do it. And that's why I keep alluding to the fact that we have to be seen as a enabler of a digital infrastructure rather than on its own. Because if they say you have an 8-story building, we probably have 50 staff working in a commercial building. So 400 people are employed. In your data center, you employ only 40 people or 30 people. So that argument doesn't hold water there. But the point is, in a land-strapped country, and whereas we are also relying on import of power for most cases, I think they're trying to cope best what they can do. But I think, yes, the dialogue has been initiated, and I think there is, some movement. Not much what we desire today, but there is some dialogue going on there.
I'm going to suggest this, unless the two of you have burning desire to answer. If not, I'm just going to ask, would anyone, yes, well, Mr. Rao?
Good morning. I come from Colliers. I head the data centers division for Colliers in India. So having seen the perspectives out here in Singapore, I mean, it's like not the question, but rather kind of couple of clarifications which I wanted to see. Hasn't Singapore tried to look at onshore windmills? Because you got huge coastal line. And that's what Indian government has done. The recent policymakers have changed their shift from the offshore to onshore to make use of 7,200 kilometers of coastline of India to be connected with, windmills. So that's the first question. Then the second thing is that the recent reports, if you actually see in the month of January, there is still 82% of the network traffic is actually routed through United States. Why is it so? I mean, can we have something like packages or layered technologies which come into the place? I mean, why no one is actually looking into this particular direction when we are talking about 82% of the data is still going through United States and then coming back to the world? I mean, isn't it the high time for our technologists to really look into it? Because that's huge amount of carbon depository.
Wow. That's my first answer to you. Wow. I will attempt to answer the first question only because I hold a mic. And so I'm a benign dictator here. Not every country is suitable for geothermal. Not every country is suitable for wind. In fact, not every country is suitable for solar as well. I have a bit of knowledge on the solar part. Surprisingly, solar power is not about heat. So even though we're in tropical climates, in fact, some of the more ideal places for solar power is where the light hits at the right angle.
Exactly.
It's about the angle, it's not about the heat.
It's the daylight, actually.
So to a lot of people's surprise, in fact, some of the best places to do solar power renewables is actually in Europe, in certain parts of Europe. In like manner, if you go to Jeju Island in Korea, you see a lot of the wind turbines. It's because you need to hit a certain sweet spot in order for it to make sense. That's true for geothermal. That's why you can't do geothermal in many parts of the world, because you need a delta T.
Right.
So geothermal, that's why. Solar, that's why. Wind, because wind is not consistent in most parts of the world, but very strong in some parts of the world. And then hydro, why is it that a good friend has opened a data center that is powered by hydropower in New Zealand? Is because they have an abundance of hydropower, but that's not possible for most parts of the world as well. So that's my answer for the first question. And as for the second question, I would suggest if you are physically here, we will tell you, but if you're not, if you're online, I'm afraid we will not tell you. So this is a good incentive for you to come back next year in person, where you will hear our answer. Most of us here are good friends, right? There are two good friends over there, and we should catch up over lunch very soon. Lake One will make it happen. We had dinner last night, and we had very good conversations. I think I see one or two more familiar faces. I won't allude to your names because you're shy. So if you're interested to know, you can reach out to us offline. You can come down now if you know where we are. That's the good reason to really come for the event, because it's when you're in person, we can have an intimate conversation, and some answers will spend more than 40 minutes. So I'm afraid in the span of a minute and a half, I can't condense that into, I can't. Apologies to the online audience and apologies to offline. But after this, you can come to the front. Some of them, if they're inclined, would give you a very interesting answer to that. And Lake One, because you're coming to take the stage next, right? Are you? Okay. So in the interest of time, I just like to ask. Okay, let's not do the clapping. Let's not do the clapping. I just want to thank all of you, because it's been a pleasure, a privilege to moderate for these esteemed panelists. They're all experts. I would pay for their time. It's just that I'm not sure I can afford your hourly rates.